New York. You've never done this.
No, I've never done this. Is this how I'm supposed to warm up for podcasts? French toast. French toast.
Unique New York.
Unique New York.
Unique New York.
All right, so we're coming to you live.
Are you recording already?
Yes. We're coming to you live from 189 Loeb Street.
We're on Shaw.
Oh, so we're in New York. Unique New York. Unique New York.
We're in Toronto.
I'll probably delete all this stuff.
Yeah.
So we are coming to you live from Toronto, Canada, in the province of Ontario.
Yes.
We are here recapping our 2019 Invisible College as a part of SIG 93. SIG stands for Special Interest Group.
Yes.
And we are a group of researchers and scholars in physical education. The SIG is titled Research on Learning and Instruction in Physical Education. And basically every year for the day and a half preceding the AERA annual conference, we get together as a SIG and put on this thing called the Invisible College, which is meant just to have conversations and dialogue and interactive sessions about bigger picture items in our field.
Or unique research methods, perhaps, or thinking about research and teaching in different ways. It's
So some of them are research based, some of them are bigger picture items, but they're not typical like what a paper session would be. 5 authors, you all have 10 to 12 minutes to talk, and then 2 minutes for questions, and then you have a discussion or something like that.
Yeah.
Invisible College is more about getting together with people and having dialogue and conversations, and that's what it should be.
Mm-hmm.
And in the future, I hope that we do have a lot of engaging lectures. So we started off, we had 2 days. So
2 half days.
2 half days.
That sounds a little overwhelming to people.
Yes. So we came in on Thursday and we ran from 1 to 5. So for essentially 55 minute sessions. Mm-hmm. The first one was from this group at Wayne State University and University of Hawaii at Manoa. So Jean Barcelona, Aaron Centeo, Christine Petter, and Haley McCown. And they talked about social and emotional learning in the PE classroom. And they have a really interesting, it was yoga that they were integrating into Michigan public schools. And I actually had a really engaging conversation about what is social and emotional learning, where does it fit, is it in the affective domain, is it different? And it was interesting to have that conversation because depending on where you're from, you're going to think about this differently.
Yeah, absolutely. I was sad to miss that this whole day, actually. So
yeah, and so the second one was by my former classmate, Mara Simon. She's now at Springfield College, and then Jess Lee and Laura Azzarito from Teachers College at Columbia University, and they talked about emotionality, curriculum, and post-colonialism, and the idea of reframing the body in PE and physical culture. And they actually did a lot of engaging videos that Jess Lee has done and made. And I talked about just reframing and understanding how the structure of physical education comes from a very white Eurocentric way. And then we had some discussion there. The third session on the first day was about transformative education, and this was visual methods. It was Carmi Dillon and Susanna Dillon. They're spelled differently.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Star Malosh from Boost Innovations. And they actually handed out a bunch of photographs to us and asked us to basically sequence those. So we partnered up. I was partnered with Jean Barcelona.
Okay.
And we had a set of 4 pictures that then we had to put into a guided narrative that showed how our lives interact in the same ways and find common themes.
Very cool.
And it was a way for us as PET educators to go through that process to demonstrate how they use visual methods.
Very cool.
And Carmi has actually done work. Her dissertation was working with refugee youth and it was super interesting about just, I mean, she talked for like 5 minutes on her dissertation, which she presented last year.
Yeah.
So that was great. The next one was by the group from University of Birmingham, not Alabama, in the UK. Vicky Goodyear, Kathy Armour, and Mark Griffiths, tremendous scholars. And it was really interesting because they did what they call a hackathon, which is they presented us with 4 questions. And the idea with the session was, what is physical education, teacher education in 2040? And so the reason why they picked 2040 was because the 2019 baby would be entering teaching or teacher. They're somewhere in the teacher education process by 2040. And they challenged us to think about what PE and what teacher education is going to be like. And it's definitely a moving target, super hard to even consider. And I think some of us struggled with saying we can't predict 2040, but it was a really interesting way to engage us into having that conversation. And that's exactly what the Invisible College is all about.
Absolutely. And I'm sure there'll be some really interesting works that come from that as well.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, and they used Poll Everywhere to have all of us put in, type in answers, and then they created a word cloud. And I think the other, they did one that's asked for research questions. What are the research questions that we should be looking at? And it was really engaging. So then we'll move on to day 2. So day 2 starts Friday. We run from 8 to about 11:30. And we had 4 sessions there.
Absolutely. You talk about this one.
Oh, yeah. So the first one was from the group at UNC Greensboro. So Ang Chen, and now at Winston-Salem State University, Tan Zong. They both kind of laid the groundwork of what they've been doing and then talked to us about issues in large-scale interventions. So we talked about how do you get IRB for 1,000 kids, and how do you get funding, and how can you get valid and reliable data and using control schools. And that was actually a really interactive time where we got to discuss issues with that, which is one of the things I have with our research is, working in low-income communities and, not getting, having a ton of missing data that then creates a large problem for me trying to publish that work. Yeah,
there's a lot of moving pieces when you're doing this large scale research. So that was really interesting.
And then they talked about, they finished off the session with discussing what they've done at UNC Greensboro. And so that's where Kathy Ennis was.
And Kathy are a great team.
Yeah, and she has gotten these massive NIH grants and NSF grants, and really is, she presented, I think, AERA Philadelphia and the Invisible College on how to get these grants. So she used to share with everybody, hey, this is what you need to do. Yeah. And that was the first time that I was actually taught at all. And what are you supposed to do with grants?
Yeah.
So
very cool.
And then Hal Lawson gave a lecture on future directions for occupational socialization research.
Hal's been an active scholar for, a lot of times folks get to, they get full professor and then they kind of, I don't want to say they disengage, but there's, they're doing other things, but he's still coming up with new and innovative things. And so he came in and gave a presentation about occupational socialization and all the pieces that have an influence on socialization, school policy, local policy, curriculum, all of these things. And I do research in teacher preparation, so it was really interesting to me to kind of consider all of those things. So that was...
And he's the preeminent scholar on this topic. So it's always interesting to have that person come in, although he did threaten to never come back. He said this was his last AERA.
For the record, I've heard him say that before. So Hal, if you hear this, come on back.
We'll see you next year in San Francisco.
Hopefully.
So then this next session was on disseminating our research and providing access to research for free. So that was a presentation that I put together with a couple of my colleagues. So we talked about this specific podcast. That was the first part of it. And just a recap, we have now 12,000 listens, and thank you for listening.
Yep.
And we've started to reach a wider audience. So Dylan Landy, Sara Flory, who's here.
Hi, everyone.
Aaron Centeo and Kevin Richards from University of Illinois. We've kind of been forming this. So we talked about that. Then Kevin Richards discussed Twitter use by physical education teachers, which is another way for researchers to engage with teachers and to kind of just give that information out. And then the next one was, and Kevin also had a few of his doc students on this paper. And then the next one was with Tim Fletcher and Stephanie Benny. They talked about their podcast, and you can find them on Twitter. It's LAMP, LAMPE.
It's a blog, not a podcast.
Oh, that's good.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not a podcast.
That's
it's
okay.
a blog.
It's okay.
Yeah.
There was a lot of moving parts to this as well.
Yeah, so they talked about how they use their website that was initially worked on by Steph Benny when she was a undergraduate research assistant. And they presented this website that they had that had a blog that people can read. And then as it has evolved, now they have all of their full text articles up there.
Yes.
And so I guess there's a law in if you are taking money from Canadian government, if there's a government grant, you have to make it accessible, which was a super cool concept, because if you ever need to read anything that Tim Fletcher has wrote, you just go to that blog website and click on it, and you can see all of those full text papers. And then Vicky Goodyear finished off talking about the MOOCs, so massive online open classes.
Yes.
And she had 13,000 people go through and take those classes, and they've had 2 of those classes.
Right.
One was on pedagogy.
Yeah.
And technology use, and the second one was youth football coaching.
Yes, European football coaching.
Yes.
Soccer for you American listeners.
Yeah. And she threw out some random facts like...
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, just going back to these MOOCs, she had so many people involved, like 155 countries tuned in, and I was baffled. I was just in awe of all of these. But yes, she did throw in a few...
just like one slide talking about, the effects of our research on social media consumption has, reached 8 million people in the UK because it was heard in Parliament.
Yeah. Just little old physical education researchers,
And showing what a lovely person Vicky Goodyear is. She just glossed over it. No big deal. This is just what I do. So good on you, Vicky Goodyear.
Yeah, we had to clarify. Wait. Are you saying?
Did you say 8 million people? Because I think my my articles reach about 7. Yeah.
I love it.
So that was, and we've tweeted about this. So there's some links, and there's some links to pictures if you follow any of us on Twitter. And the last session was a super interesting look into German student-centered philosophy for physical education, which is called Bildung. And we had 2 German scholars, Jonas Wiebowo. I know I mispronounced that, Jonas, I'm sorry. And then Klaus Krieger. And I'm actually not going to pronounce those universities. I can pronounce Hamburg Universität. I'll give this a guess. Bergische Universität in Wuppertal.
Oh.
Yeah. Those are pretty not well pronounced. But can you talk about that session, just the video? And things that
they shared a video about sort of creating or how the German physical education approach, it differs from the U.S. approach for certain, and it's very student-centered, and they showed this great video of the students sort of problem-solving and taking their time to figure things out, and there was this great concept of, it was like a gymnastics lesson. They were using a springboard to do a dive roll, and they were talking about the doing
Yep.
And then they talked about the we as they
Yep.
did the dive. And that was just the doing and the we. And I think we have to sometimes think about that in our own lives. Like what, but really interesting. It was a really interesting session. And I loved learning about the perspective from other countries and just how we can, see how things are just so different and what works and what the challenges are and all of those things.
And they had a picture of the design of the German curriculum that I took a picture of and I tweeted out.
Oh,
which,
very cool.
If you look at it, it's very different than what the U.S. approach is.
Hands down.
Yeah.
Hands down.
So that was our 2 days of Invisible College.
Can I give a little?
Yeah.
Let's
do it.
I just want to, I want to just take this opportunity. I'm rotating off the leadership of the SIG in May, but the Invisible College is some of the most incredible scholarship that I think we have an opportunity to interact with around as PE scholars. So I want to just encourage everyone to submit proposals when that big call goes out in June or July for papers next year. Again, the Invisible College can be interactive. It doesn't have to be you don't have to present empirical research findings. It can be very theoretical. It can be discussion. It can be an activity. All of these different things, and it's one of the highlights for me of conferences. And I go to 2 or 3 conferences a year, but being able to go and work through those sessions with such diverse topics and scholars.
It is outside the box thinking.
Yeah.
It's a way to flesh out some of these ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to put the call out in for July. So this year, usually it came out like November, December.
Yeah, we would usually put out that call for the Invisible College after the decisions for AERA had been, acceptances had been made. But, if you're going to put in a paper, hey, put in an Invisible College session as well.
Yeah.
Why not?
And if you are listening to this and you are a member of AERA or not, we highly, highly recommend that you become a member of AERA and then scroll down and click to add SIG 93.
Research on learning and instruction in physical education.
Absolutely. So SIG 93, click it, become a member. When you're a member, then you're able to present in the Invisible College and come in and learn from all of these. I mean, if you listen to these names, Ong Chen, Hal Lawson, we have, Laura Azzurito, Kathy Armour, Mark Griffiths, Vicky Goodyear. These are people who are publishing a lot in our field. Aaron Centeo, Tim Fletcher. These are people who are putting out the high quality scholarship in our field, and they are there right in front of you doing interactive sessions with you, next to you.
Yeah.
I think Steve Silverman has been to every single Invisible College since he got into this, and he's a person that you can interact with in these really tight, cool groups.
Yeah.
So we highly recommend that you do, if you have some good work or good ideas to present. There are most likely going to be 8 slots again in there, and we also have a really cool social. After day 1, we go out and socialize.
We do. We socialize with one another.
Yeah,
and really get to know one another. It's a great little community.
Yeah. And if you're looking for a community of researchers and scholars in physical education and you don't find that at other conferences or, this is the place. This is the place. And I feel like I've made a ton of, really, really good friends through this and learned a ton. So we'll put the call out.
Yeah.
And, that's all we got.
This is.
All right. Yeah. Fist bump.